Welcome, everyone, to the Elmore Leonard Podcast. My name is Judd Rubin. I am here with Alex Leonard, and we're going to be talking about the man, the work of the great Elmore Leonard. In addition to doing podcasting, I do some work in television and film and some smaller companies in the tech world. And I was lucky enough to be a co-producer on an adaptation of Elmore Leonard's Freaky Deaky. And that's where I got to meet Elmore a couple of times. I got to have an amazing dinner at your dad's house where Elmore hit on my then girlfriend the entire evening. And it is a badge of honor I will never, ever take off.
I mean, he was probably 85 at the time or something.
Didn't matter. Didn't matter. For the record, so was she. So it was a good match. It was a good match. No, I am currently working with Peter Leonard, also your dad, Elmore's son, and a pretty great novelist in his own right on another adaptation of The Hot Kid. One of the things I want to talk about specifically with you, because not only do you do podcasts, but you're a rock star. You're an actual musician. You're in Proto-Martyr. You tour the land. You play all the great places. Not the main room in at First Ave, but 7th Street Entry, which is pretty great. One of the things, and this is where I want to start the conversation, is there's so much music, particularly in Rum Punch, which we're going to talk about today. There's a ton of music, Motown in particular. I'm just curious, did you learn about music from these books?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I learned about it from the books, but I had many conversations with Elmore about the music connection to these books, because he loved music. I mean, he would tell all kinds of funny stories, getting his fake ID taken when he was 18. He was at a jazz club, like the most famous, oldest jazz club in Detroit, which is called Baker's, and he got his ID taken there. Like, it's very connected with his life, this music is. He told me he had a subscription to a Backbeat magazine.
Okay.
And then he asked me, what is the Backbeat? So I had to explain to him. I'm sure, it's not like a technical magazine. I'm sure it's just about musicians, but I thought that was pretty funny.
I would love to know what a fake ID looked like because he's been gone a few years, and he lived a life. I think he was late 80s. So when he was 18, what did regular IDs look like, and what did a fake ID look like then? I'd love to know.
That's a good question. I do remember the name on it was James Harry Landino.
That's not bad.
And the end of the story is that he had to show up in court, and this is when he was on leave from the Navy. So he shows up in his Navy dress uniform, and the judge immediately threw it out. He couldn't throw the book at one of our fighting boys.
Exactly. Well, so he's old enough to be in the Navy, but he wasn't old enough to get into a club? Like, how old do you have to be?
Yeah, I think at that era, I think it was, he was, by his own admission, he'd had 5 whiskey sours, so he was certainly overserved.
These things happen. These
exactly.
happen. In the time of war, we have to make some accommodations. Rum Punch in particular, which we're going to talk about. And just as a little note, this is our first time recording an official podcast. Our format, we're going to talk a lot about the book, a lot about the characters, some questions we have. But we're hoping that if you're listening to this, you've already read the book. So there may be the occasional spoiler in here. But at the same time, if you haven't and you want to keep listening, we'd love it if you stick around. But go read the book at some point. We'll be here. We'll still be in your phone or wherever you're listening. So you got to read not just this book, but all these books. And that's something we're going to be covering over the course of this podcast.
It's also something I find very interesting about Elmore's work is that he doesn't have the one novel that is the automatic starting point. And in fact, I feel like most people have a different favorite, which is, I think, pretty unique for authors of his type.
Well, he was unique in a lot of ways. One of them, one thing is that for authors of his stature, he certainly has characters show up in many books, and Rum Punch is a great example because there's a handful of characters who, in many ways, Rum Punch is a sequel to The Switch, which we're definitely going to be talking about. But there's he populates the books with characters from different novels regularly.
There is an extended universe if you're paying attention to it.
There's an extended Elmore universe, but he didn't use a character over and over and over again like, those hacks, Raymond Chandler or Vicky Spillane.
It's funny because I heard him talk about that he would have been fine since a lot of his main characters are pretty similar by his own admission, but his agent told him that he could sell the rights to more people if he just made it the guy a different name.
Well, then there you go. I think he made the right call. One of the reasons why I'm really excited about doing this podcast with you, Alex, is that when you were growing up, you'd read a book, you'd finish it, and then you'd hop on your skateboard or your bike or whatever, go over to Grandpa's house and get the lowdown.
He lived a couple blocks away. I'd just knock on the door, show up and hang out for an hour and just kind of go through like, where'd you come up with this? Why did you think of this?
Did he ever see you and then not open the door?
Oh, no, he liked company. It was kind of funny. I mean, I think I was, maybe 15 when I first started going over. Yeah. Now thinking about it, it's like kind of mortifying that he would stop writing just to hang out.
That's fantastic.
But it was cool. And it wasn't just me. It was like, he had lots of visitors and the whole family was very close. So
yeah.
It was lots of people would drop by. But he loved talking about the work, so that was always fun.
So as prolific as he was, I believe off the top of my head there's 47 novels, not including all the short stories. But if it wasn't for those meddling kids like you, there probably would have been 55 or 60. Is that fair to assume?
Perhaps, yeah.
All right, well.
I apologize.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We'll save how we got here for our 200th episode, but let's jump into Rum Punch. And, you were saying in terms of what was unique about Elmore is everyone kind of comes in on a different book. There's usually not like a main book which is unique for authors of his stature. When did you discover Rum Punch? And do you think it's one of his all-time greats?
I discovered it first from the movie Jackie Brown.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I started reading his books when I was in high school, but I was definitely into movies before I was into reading. So I for sure would have seen the movie before reading the book.
Was he aware of that?
Probably. He loved movies,
yeah.
So I don't think that was a knock against anybody finding his work through the film. He has said from the beginning he was trying to write to get his stories made into movies.
No, I mean there's definitely cinematic quality to so many of his books. What's interesting is there's only a handful of adaptations that I think live up to the book. And as somebody who worked really hard on an adaptation that didn't quite hit the mark, I know what it's like to swing and miss. And hopefully with The Hot Kid, which we're lucky to be working on with some amazing people, Anna Perna, Stephen Feeder, Kiri Hart, Olivia Purnell, who's our showrunner and adapting this great book. I think we're in great hands, but these aren't easy, and that is something that we're going to be exploring throughout this podcast, throughout these episodes, is how come some adaptations work, how come they don't. We are going to be joined by a lot of people who were involved. We actually, in upcoming episodes, will be talking to people like Michael Siegel, who represented Elmore when a lot of these adaptations were being made. Stacey Scher, the amazing producer who was involved in Out of Sight and Get Shorty. She also produced Pulp Fiction. So these are folks who have a really interesting insider's view of what it takes to put it together, and we're super excited about that. But let's talk about this book. We're here to talk about Rum Punch, and let's actually do that. So I've got my Chip Kid paperback right here. You've got a garage full of first editions, so you win. But what jumps out at you? Because we sort of got sidetracked, but like, I actually don't know, as great as this book is, I don't know if I would call it one of Elmore's best, but...
Oh, I disagree. I think it's up there.
Well, here's the thing. This is what we have to define as we go on.
Sure.
Out of 47 books, because I'm thinking like top 5, Yeah. So out of 47, we can't have the top 37. So maybe as we go,
for sure,
we'll define the size of the top shelf of Elmore.
I mean, we could keep a running list, which number 1 would be this right now, but you know what I mean. Like the next book we do, maybe it'll displace this one.
It'll be a movable feast.
Exactly.
I do think it's a great book.
I do though think this one is one of my favorites, mostly because of how It is the semi-sequel, but I think it really informs the earlier book in a very, very interesting way.
How so?
Elmore has a certain type of main character, or they're similar throughout the books. And one thing that I've noticed here is that his main character, he always has a few, but the main guy, the Elmore stand-in to me in this book is Max Cherry.
Sure.
In The Switch, which is the book this is the semi-sequel to, that character is Lewis.
Right.
So Lewis in this book, in Rum Punch, is completely different. Time has warped him. He's
had a rough few years.
Apathetic. He's useless. You know what I mean? Prison has not been good to him.
As Ordell says to him, who was his partner in The Switch, "You were beautiful. What happened to you, man?"
Exactly.
The years were not kind to Lewis. I think that in a lot of ways, one of the great things about these books is that within them there are so many different types of stories. There's a tragic aspect to it. I think certainly when we're talking about Lewis, there's often a heist, a caper. The action is centered around, and a lot of times there's
or a con, something like that.
Yeah.
Most of his books have a central romance for sure.
And there's something really unique about Rum Punch. We start off where, in terms of the cops are already involved from the get-go. As soon as we meet Jackie, she's in trouble, and she's got to figure out a way out, which typically, if there is a cop, if they are involved, they're usually behind the action, not ahead of it. And so that adds a really nice layer of Jackie is in constant jeopardy throughout this story, and she's got to figure out an interesting way out. And the other is that
from the moment we meet her, she's not like a normal baseline who then gets more stressed as the con piles up. She's always stressed and pressured.
She's always in it, and to me it makes her really unique in that she's still able to. She seems like she's handling the stress really well, and
well, numerous characters say she's cool.
Right. No, she totally is, and that's what I think a lot of what draws Max to her. And Max's age comes up a lot.
Well, I noticed that a lot of people's age, I think that's like kind of a main theme of the book, is dealing with age and dealing with your situation. Because it's Max's age, but it's also like random characters. It says how old they are, and another thing is like how old they act, or
right.
Melanie's 34, but you'd think she's 20 years older.
She's in her own way another tragic character, but funny, and like Lewis, still funny.
I think she's the funniest. I was pulling up my favorite lines from her, and I think she's got the top ones.
Yeah, she's pretty great, and we're gonna go through. So one of the things, obviously, Elmore is one of the great writers of dialogue in the English language. So we will be talking about some of our favorite lines in the book, and we want to hear from everyone listening. What are your favorite lines? What did we miss? What do you disagree with? Just go to elmoreleonardpodcast.com, join the party. So yeah, let's talk about age also, because there's a ton of things happening in this book. We start off at a white power rally. There's gun sales. There's people getting back into prison. There's people chasing. There's Max, who's a bail bondsman, who's chasing down different criminals to bring them back to jail, having dinner with them in some cases. But despite all the things that are happening, it's a very restrained book. And that, to me, it goes hand in hand with the idea of age. And Max is, we hear several times, he's 57 years old. It comes up with Renee, his soon-to-be ex-wife. Comes up with Jackie, who's in her 40s. She's I think she's 44. Yeah. But that is something that is really interesting. And so I guess the obvious question that I have for you, as someone who actually knew the author, and maybe you talked about it, maybe you didn't, but was Elmore starting to feel his age when he wrote this? What do you think he was saying about getting older with this book?
I think he's saying that age is kind of about attitude. I think that we get the number of how old people are, but the number of comments about how you would think that they were older, or Simone puts on makeup and appears 20 years younger. Mm-hmm. I think he would say that he always felt in his mind that he was, 17 or something. It was still the same guy. And Jackie has a line about that, which is, I look in the mirror, I'm the same person I was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think attitude has a big thing to do with this book. I think he's also ruminating on basically not getting a second chance or life kind of chewing you up, which I find very interesting because he was a guy who kind of, put the pen to the paper and worked through decades without real success. I find it very interesting that this book was about 6 years into his bestseller era, and he's kind of, ruminating about like not making it or being done or past your prime or something, when he basically got out of that whole era like he made it out.
Right. And you have, so Max has been working for a while as a bail bondsman. He was a cop for a little bit, or maybe a sheriff, became a bail bondsman. He talks about having done something like over 10,000. I don't remember the number, bonds in his career. And he, because of Jackie and because of the trouble she finds her in, let's talk about what is actually going on. So just to remind some of you who've read the book, and also if you haven't, we'll set the stage a little bit. So Jackie's a flight attendant for a not so great airline. If you're familiar with the movie is set on the West Coast, but the book is set in Florida on the East Coast. And Jackie works for a small airline that flies back and forth from Florida to the Bahamas. And on her way back, she gets pulled.
Well, she was previously busted. Her ex-husband was a drug addict, drunk pilot, and she basically got fired from her kind of tenured flight attendant job, and this was the only thing she could get.
Right.
It's less pay, kind of worse airline, but where she is in her life, this is all she's got going.
Right. In terms of what else she can do, does not seem like there's that many things that she feels like she could do. Now, you see how she operates and how she works with people and maybe manipulates people. She seems like she could do whatever she wants to. She's a highly capable, highly intelligent person who figures this out.
And they don't really talk too much about how she would get involved with Ordell. I think they glance over it for 1 second, but it seems odd to me that she would even be involved with him anyway. She must have been more desperate than we even knew.
Well, that's the thing, and because we're starting where essentially as soon as we meet her, we meet Ray Nicolette. Forgive me, is it Farron?
Yeah, Farron Tyler.
Farron, okay. I'm never sure how to pronounce it, so I'm reading and it's like Farron, Farron, I don't know, but Farron, who are different branches of law enforcement, but they basically, I don't know if they officially arrest her, but they go through her stuff. And no, she is arrested because she goes to prison. And they find $50,000 in cash and a small bag of cocaine. And she's stuck. She's in trouble right away. She's got to find her way out. And she does this slowly but surely, using everyone around her to help her cause. But we don't really know how she ends up working with Ordell, who is, speaking of the switch, he is neither Ordell or Lewis have mellowed with age. Lewis has been ground down. Ordell feels sharper, and he was never the kindest person in the switch.
He was kind of laid back, though.
He was
the way he got along with Mickey and kind of wanted to get out of the kidnapping.
Right. In this, he's using everybody around him, and so it's kind of fun.
Did you ever see that movie Straight Time? It's a Dustin Hoffman movie from late 70s. And Dustin Hoffman is a guy who gets out of prison and has to live in the real world.
Yeah.
And it's a crime movie. It's actually fantastic, and Elmore really liked that film. But Lewis is kind of that type of character. It's a guy who just can't hack it outside of the prison system. He's been in too long.
Yeah. And we know that Ordell is trying to take advantage of him. And, what's interesting about Ordell is he knows that other people, particularly Melanie, is trying to take advantage of him, but he knows that when it comes down to it, he's willing and happy to get rid of her. But she's also willing to do it to him, which is a lot of fun. And we see that in the scene, which is in the book. It's not in the movie.
And Melanie is one of Ordell's 3 kept women.
That's exactly.
She also appears in The Switch. as kind of part of their con at the end of the book of the switch, but she's stuck around for the intervening years and is still with Ordell.
She's still with Ordell. She has not made the most of her of her time. She seems to enjoy being a kept woman, but also she's a little resentful of her situation, and just to backtrack slightly, she not only was in the switch, but she was the woman. And we'll actually do a whole episode about the switch, and maybe if we're lucky enough, we can get Dan Schechter, who directed the adaptation, to be on and get his take as well.
Which was called Life of
Crime. That movie is about a woman who, not quite, I wouldn't say middle-aged, but a married woman who's kidnapped with the expectation that her wealthy husband will pay a juicy ransom. And he decides, no, that's okay. I don't want her back. I was going to divorce her anyway. You can have her. And he was shacking up with a young woman named Melanie. And that's who we meet again after all of these years.
I like that they referenced, though, that the movie Ruthless People is basically that plot with Danny DeVito and Bette Midler.
Yeah.
And they say, it seemed implausible in the film or something. I like that. It's a little in-joke from Elmore in there.
For sure. It happened several times where there would be, whether it was the plot or a particular scene from one of Elmore's books, that would be paid homage to in a movie without actually ever giving Elmore credit or optioning the book or anything like that. That happened many, many times. It happened here in Freaky Deaky. My understanding is one of the times that it was going to be adapted before it finally was. It was in the late 80s, early 90s, and the person who was going to direct it saw Lethal Weapon 2, which paid homage to the opening scene, whose opening scene pays a lot of homage.
I think Elmore said they stole my scene.
Yeah, that too. And so
that's paid homage with some air quotes.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, where they stole it, and the director, the person who's going to direct it, saw that and basically walked away, and so, like that happened throughout.
The scene in question is a guy sitting on a toilet with a bomb under it.
And if he gets off, it blows up, and what is he supposed to do? And it's slightly different. There's well, we'll let you watch both movies, and but the main thing is to read Freaky Deaky, which we will definitely be talking about. All right, so we're sort of sliding all over the place, which is fine. But let's go through the characters and the players. We've got our main character is Max, who one of our main. Let's talk about our main characters.
Typical Elmore Leonard
exactly.
book. There's kind of an ensemble, but Max, I would say, is the center. Like I said before, he's kind of the Elmore stand-in, which. When I say that, he talks about he has French-American / Creole heritage, which Elmore had. And his favorite drink is bourbon over shaved ice, which Elmore, before he went sober, he would say that was the best drink. That was his favorite.
Well, it's a tasty drink. So Max is a bail bondsman. He's in an unhappy marriage. He lives separately from his wife, who's been shacking up with an artist who paints her in the nude, and they sell paintings for a good chunk of money, $3,500 a pop. That's pretty good for a painter. As far as I know. He's a bail bondsman. He's 57, and he's starting to think about what's he going to do with the rest of his life. He seems like he's in a pretty good spot, but also he's not doing what he wants to do forever.
But he has those dual questions, though, of do I get out of bail bondsman? Do I get out of being a bail bondsman, which he wants to do, and do I finally divorce my wife? But he's kind of stuck in this place of inaction.
He is stuck. He is stuck, and there is something about Jackie, who the movie's called Jackie Brown. In the book, her name is Jackie Burke. He bails her out of jail. He's hired by Ordell to bail her out of jail. Now, Ordell is the most dangerous person in the book. He runs guns. He first meets Max when he hires Max to bail out an associate of Ordell's, Beaumont Livingston, memorably played in the movie by Chris Tucker. Ordell bails him out of jail only to execute him. And so we know right away the stakes that Jackie is what Jackie's facing, the danger that she's in.
But by this time, Beaumont has already ratted on Ordell, and that's how Jackie gets caught by the cops initially, from a tip by Beaumont.
Right. So Ordell, now Lewis, we've talked about. Lewis is an old pal of Ordell's who's just got out of prison. He just did 4 years this time. He doesn't really have anything to do. He doesn't have anywhere to live. He hangs out with Melanie a little bit, with Simone a little bit. I don't think he ever hangs out at Sharonda's. Sharonda is the third of Ordell's kept women. But he meets Max by being employed by an insurance company that sort of assigns him to Max to help Max out, track people down, pick people up. He's not very good at it. He's not very interested in it, but that is how we first meet him. Just while we're on this topic, we never actually meet. We hear about these guys who own this insurance company.
And that they're mob affiliated. So they're bad guys.
They're bad guys who we don't really meet. Similar to Mr. Walker, who is Ordell's partner in Ordell's main scam, which is stealing guns and stealing high-powered military weapons and selling them, and to whoever he wants. And he's become quite successful at doing this. In addition to...
But his main problem, though, is that his money is stuck in the Bahamas.
Right. Mr. Walker, his partner, is based in the Bahamas, and that's where the money is. And Jackie has been essentially working as a courier for Ordell, bringing the money, back in and maybe getting a small piece of it. I mean, we don't know how long she's been doing it, but however long she's been doing it, she's not saving enough money to really change her life.
I think the implication is that she hasn't done it very much because Ordell is basically out of cash after he bails out Beaumont Livingston.
Okay, so let's just run through this real quick. We've got Ordell, we've got Lewis, we've got Max, we've got Jackie. We also have Ray Nicolette. And Ray, what's interesting about Ray, we're talking about age, is we're constantly hearing how young Ray is and how much he likes being a cop. And, he's a charming guy. He's a likable guy.
He's kind of a little bit of a jerk.
He definitely crosses the line a few times. I'm thinking particularly about he is trying to get Max to put up a bond on somebody for free. And Max declines. This would put him in a lot of jeopardy if something were to happen. And there's a great conversation with Ray and Max's associate Winston, who is a former heavyweight boxer, and not somebody that you want to mess with. And he has to threaten Ray to get him to back down when Ray is effectively saying, I'll take some of the people that you've bonded out and I'll put them in witness protection and then you'll be out the money. And this isn't a major plot point.
Which he says it with a wink. He says, what if I do that? But immediately Max and Winston are just like, you son of a bitch.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
They don't find it funny.
No, it's not. And he pushes the envelope a little bit, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That ultimately is a big part of how Jackie gets out of her situation, is because she's able to involve Ray and take advantage of his overly aggressive nature when it comes to this stuff. Other than those, am I missing any of the main players? I think we've covered all of them.
You've skipped the white supremacists, but they're pretty minor.
I have, and who is also a little bit of a callback to some of the white supremacists and Nazis in The Switch. Ordell is trying to get Lewis to help him kill a leader of a white supremacist gang who happens to have a large warehouse of weapons that Ordell has his eyes on. They ultimately end up stealing those weapons, but it's not Lewis that kills this guy. It's Melanie. And in that moment, Melanie is also trying to kill this guy whose name escapes me at the moment. I want to say Big Guy. Gerald, who's referred to as Big Guy, but his name is Gerald. And in the course of it, Melanie is trying to get Lewis to kill Ordell. This happens about halfway into the book. And so this is a really, the power dynamics here are constantly shifting. And who's able to take advantage of who and why and how is fascinating as we go through the book.
One aspect of it is when you talk to people who have seen the film Jackie Brown but haven't read the book, I would say, you're not going to believe this, but Tarantino cut out a white supremacist subplot.
Just to talk briefly about Jackie Brown, I really think it's one of Tarantino's best movies. And one of the things that, for me, really stands out is just he spends a lot of time getting to know all of these characters. Because
of that, it's a little slower paced, which I think it's a movie that rewards multiple viewings. I think the first time when you want to know what happens, it seems kind of slow, but I've seen it every time I watch it, I like it more.
I really believe it's one of his best movies, and this is the movie that he made after Pulp Fiction, which made a ton of money. It won the Palme d'Or. It won him an Academy Award. Him and his writing partner Roger Avary an Academy Award. Jackie Brown was successful, but it didn't have the same spectacular success that Pulp Fiction did, and I wonder if it had, what kind of movies Tarantino would have made after. I think after Jackie Brown, he leaned into straight genre
outrageousness,
influence movies, Kill Bill, the Death Proof movies. I think now, obviously Once Upon a Time in Hollywood I thought was a fantastic movie, but
same, one of his best. But Jackie Brown's the only one that's like kind of completely straight. Which in a way I think kind of proves his talent as a filmmaker, that he's saying, hey, you want me to do like a straight up legit crime movie? I've done it.
He did, and I think that the way that he explores character, he's basing it off of this great book, and now in some of the dialogue in the movie is Tarantino's, but much of it is Elmore's. So he's certainly got a lot to work with here. I do wonder, what kind of movies Tarantino would have made if this one had the success that Pulp Fiction had. I would have liked to see those movies. Not that he hasn't done.
Well, he optioned so many movies or so many properties of Elmore's and said he was going to do them over the years. Right before he made Jackie Brown, he was on the hook to make Kill Shot. And Elmore, for over a year, thought he was busy writing the Kill Shot script until he talked to him and found out it was not just Rum Punch, but that it was changed to be Jackie Brown.
Well, remind me of this, and this is something that I'm hoping to talk to Michael Siegel about. But didn't Miramax option 4 books at a time? And
I thought it was 5. Maybe it is 4. Yeah, but he had a bunch. I think it was like,
and I think
we'll do this one first, then we'll do this, or we'll get somebody else to direct, because Tarantino at the time was still,
he could do whatever he wanted.
Wrote True Romance for Tony Scott. He could write without directing at that point.
Right. He after Pulp Fiction, he could do whatever he wanted, and I think Miramax had optioned Kill Shot, Rum Punch, Freaky Deaky, and maybe one other book.
Maybe The Switch even, because that was one of Tarantino's favorite books. That was the story that he got caught stealing a copy of The Switch.
He got caught shoplifting the book. Yeah. So yeah, it very well, and it would make sense if it was The Switch, just because we have similar characters throughout. So
I was thinking about that actually, the connection between, why would he do Rum Punch, which at that point was only a couple years old. That was a brand new Elmore book.
Yeah.
And the only reason, I think it's because it's a fantastic book, but also I think because at the time Tarantino was known for rehabbing the career of John Travolta, from taking this guy who everyone thought was past his prime. And I'm like, well, that's the entire theme of Rum Punch, is people who you think are done and they have another act left in them.
Right.
So to him, that's, I can do the Pam Grier, Robert Forster thing. That's one of my specialties, is finding this gem of an actor who's been discarded.
Right. That's really interesting. And just to touch on Tarantino and Travolta again, it was Tarantino who really encouraged Travolta to do Get Shorty. And I think it was a couple years after this, and he just said, this is not a script you pass on. And that was Scott Frank and Barry Sonnenfeld, and that was an amazing movie. And we'll be covering that as well.
Yeah, I just read the profile that quote is from, actually. Martin Amis wrote it, where he was hanging out with John Travolta. And Travolta, he would say that if the script was good, he would pass on it. If it was bad, he was saying yes to it, and he had no idea why. And Get Shorty was the good one that he was passing on to do the talking dog movie.
And well, luckily Tarantino changed his mind, because it was great for everybody. I mean, that's one of, I think, what a lot of people think of Elmore Leonard adaptations. They think of Get Shorty. It was a fantastic movie. All right, so it's a little tricky, and this is one of the things that you'll notice as we talk about these books is, I think it's fair to say that Elmore is much more interested in character and story than plot. And so
Yes.
the plot itself is, let's try to state it as simply as possible. Flight attendant Jackie Burke has been arrested for moving money, and the cops want her to keep doing what she's doing and set up her boss, who we know is ready and willing to kill her and anybody else that he has to. And so she has to figure out a way to, number one, not go to jail, number two, not get killed, but also she's got her hands on over $500,000. And is this a way for her to start fresh, get out, and have a new life? So that is what's happening. And along the way, we meet a ton of people who make things in some ways easier, in some ways harder, but in an interesting way.
They all seem to be at a similar crossroads, though. That their life has led them to this point, and this is the only way out, or this is the only way they see forward.
It's not just one of our characters who's trying to make one last big score.
I think that's why I like this book so much, actually, because it does seem thematically cohesive.
100%. You have, let's just go through it. Other than Lewis, who doesn't seem to be able to really function anymore, sadly.
Oh yeah, he's burned out for sure.
He's the gears are have been ground down, but Ordell is trying to get out. Max is trying to get out. Jackie is trying to get out, and Melanie is, in some ways, she probably has the most experience manipulating people. She's just not as good at it as any of these other characters.
She's, in many ways, seems to have the least to do with the plot, and yet she's so funny that I could see Elmore kind of keeping her in more scenes, because like every time she's in there, she's hilarious.
Right. Yeah. No. She's in her mid-30s, but
has been sitting in the sun for 17 years, so she appears older.
She drinks a lot. She does all sorts of drugs. She smokes a lot, and she gets by essentially being one of Ordell's kept women. She's okay with that. But she's also very bright. She's also very funny, and she's also deadly. She kills people.
Do you have a favorite Melanie line?
My favorite line in the book is Melanie's, and it's a simple line, but I think it's a great example of, this is not a great example of Elmore's fantastic dialogue. It is a great example of Elmore putting the simplest words in the perfect place. After we reintroduce Melanie to the proceedings, Elmore gives us a little bit of backstory of what she's been up to, and she hasn't had an easy road. She's been involved in kidnappings. She's been involved in gun deals. She's been involved in things she doesn't want to be in. And Ordell floats the idea that she goes down to the Bahamas to hang out with Mr. Walker, who we never meet, but we understand that he is somebody that Ordell answers to. And if Ordell's a scary guy, then Mr. Walker's probably a pretty scary guy too. So Melanie, responding to Ordell's offer of going down to the Bahamas and hanging out, she just says, "No thanks."
You can ride his boat. Yeah, do you want to go down and ride his boat?
And, she's earned, even though she has no real power with Ordell, she's still been through enough with him where she's earned the right to basically say, no, I'm in a bad spot, but I'm not going to get into a worse spot. And it made me laugh out loud. And ultimately, it's a really telling line, because her downfall is that, she's trying constantly she's relying on people like, Lewis in particular, to get her out. First,
she tries to recruit Jackie, but Jackie's not interested.
She tries a couple times to recruit Jackie, and she tries a couple times with Lewis. Where first she tries to get Lewis to kill Ordell. He doesn't. He doesn't really say anything about it. Doesn't really act on it. Nothing happens to Melanie until much later at the climax of this heist, where her demise is that she can't let Lewis go. I mean, she's just, and it's almost like her frustration about having thrown her life away to essentially be this kept woman for this gun runner. She's seeing Jackie take control of her destiny, and her frustration with never having done that for herself gets the best of her, and she just goes at Lewis until, Lewis just snaps, and Lewis kills her.
Well, you go from the switch where kidnapping is too far for Lewis. He thinks that's crossing a line, to Rum Punch, where he gets annoyed with someone and kills them.
Yeah.
That's the character progression, which for an author like Elmore Leonard, who gets so attached to his characters, it's pretty remarkable that that's the fate he has for some of these people.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is why with Lewis it's a little bit of a tragedy, because in a lot of ways, the Lewis of The Switch is similar to Max Cherry. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, the one thing I thought was interesting was they go through how Lewis used to rob banks, and he would write "take it easy" on a note and then go through with the robbery.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Take it easy" is how what Elmore would inscribe on 99% of the books that he would sign for people.
Oh, really?
I'm like, Lewis used to be the fun.
That's awesome.
Kind of very chill guy. Excuse me. He used to be the very chill guy, but life destroyed him. But yeah, I'm like, I see things like that where I'm like, he had real affection for Lewis, but he follows the character. He follows like the reality of their situation, and for Lewis, it's a bunch of bad mistakes led to his early death.
Is there a point in the book where you feel like it was over for Lewis? I mean, obviously not where he makes a certain decision, he does something. Was there anything in your mind that basically just said, all right, Lewis is cooked?
I don't know if one stands out. I mean, that kind of odyssey he has where he goes back to South Beach kind of just to see if he's still got it and robs a liquor store is like so depressing to me, where he's like, oh, these places used to be cool spots to hang out in. They're not anymore.
Well, it's not only that he robs a liquor store, he breaks into at the time, his boss's office to steal a gun.
Yes, that's how it ends.
Well, this is the thing that's so funny about it. He tries to to rob a liquor store, but the liquor store owner has a gun and basically shoos him away and is like, get the hell out of here. And Lewis does. So Lewis's solution is not to tell himself, I think my armed robbery days are over. No, he goes and steals the guns. And he breaks into Max's office and he steals these guns and does it again and makes off with a little bit of money maybe, but not a lot.
I think he has Ordell's words in his ears, though, where it's, you have to start taking this stuff seriously.
Right. Yeah.
You can't just amble your way through life, and it's the exact worst person to be a mentor to him.
Well, yeah, but it's all that he has. I mean, that is the sad part. So I had shared that Melanie's very brief line, turning down an offer to go hang out with Mr. Walker. That was my favorite of the book. What was your favorite of the book?
Favorite of the book? Ooh, I think Melanie says about Gerald, the white supremacist, if you think I'm going to fuck that bozo, you're out of your mind, is one of my favorites. But I think the one I laughed the hardest for was when Max Cherry goes to Simone's house to take the money and the guns.
Yeah.
And Simone says at the end of the chapter, she says, does that man have a job? Does he work? And Lewis says, yeah, he's a bail bondsman. It's Max Cherry. And she said, because he don't know shit about robbing people.
Well, right.
I was like, that's it. That's the most distilled Elmore Leonard, funny, cool line.
No, it's great. Yeah. So he goes and he not only he takes $1,000 out of the 10 that's sitting at Simone's house, but he leaves the watch, the fake Rolex that Ordell had given him as collateral, which turns out to be worth a couple $100. It's not totally worthless, but it's not worth $1,000. And so Max leaves the watch, takes $1,000, and the guns that Lewis had stolen from him, and hits the road. In your mind, who was it that was really pushing the action here throughout? Because the one thing that's interesting about the book is you have so many different people making so many different decisions, that it does feel like there's more than one person pushing the action forward.
I mean, I think Max is kind of the moral center of the book, but if it was just a book about him, nothing would happen, which is, evidenced by his lack of a divorce and still being a bail bondsman. So I think, of course, we got Ordell as the main antagonist, and Jackie, I think, is driving the action because she's the one who gets Max on the plan. She's the one who comes up with the whole plan to switch the money in. But Jackie is interested because she is kind of a mystery. Like, we don't have too many chapters that are from her perspective. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't really know what she wants to do. If she's really interested in Max, like, we're kind of left guessing, which propels the plot, propels the interest. But I think that, the two of them, Jackie and Max combined, are the, central characters pushing everything.
Right. I definitely, reading it and having, reread it recently, I wanted to know more about Jackie, but I think where I kind of landed on that was, if we knew more about Jackie, we probably wouldn't have as much tension with Max in terms of, are they going to end up together? Is she manipulating him? Is she? And we know that she is working him a little bit. She needs him.
And we know that Max has been worked by his ex-wife for years. So
right.
Even though we like the guy, we know that he's susceptible to
he's susceptible.
Getting played.
He's not unaware that this might be happening.
But they get along. I think it's, a lot of Elmore's books have that central romance. And I think that to him, flirting with somebody and the prospect of liking her for real is enough for him to say, this is a risk, but that's fine.
It is, and it's something that he's been without for a long time. When Max thinks about his love life, such as it is, he's not thinking about when times were good with his ex-wife as much as he is thinking about the waitress that he used to shack up with. And things have been so cold and so dead for so long with his soon-to-be ex-wife Renee that he's pretty ripe for somebody like Jackie, who's smart and beautiful and sexy, maybe taking advantage of him. He's game. He is game, and I think they're both game. And I think
But even at the end, he doesn't take his half of the money. He's
right.
He still has his code. It's kind of him saying, I took this risk, but that wasn't why.
Exactly. And that's probably why Jackie comes around. So, we'll do some spoilers here. For those of you who haven't read, go read. We'll be here. But for those of you who have read it, let's just do a quick recap of the end. So Jackie manipulates the action around her, and she takes some huge risks. The big risk that she takes, not only in trying to take advantage of Ordell, who we know is a killer, even though he likes to have other people do it for the most part, but he's ready and willing and able to kill anybody he feels.
Melanie says he's changed. That's, she says that he's not the same as he was. He's changed, and that the change means that he's capable of killing people. He's
coldly and easily
fine.
and quickly, and setting people up.
Which is funny that he is recruiting Lewis to try to kill the white supremacists, because we know that Ordell has no problem with murder. Is that just to get him deeper in the plan? Is that just because he likes manipulating people?
I think that he's assumed the role of upper management, and he doesn't want to get his hands dirty if he doesn't have to, because ultimately the people who are doing the dirty work are going to take the fall. And he's evolved. He's got his Jack Boys, who are younger kids who are for the most part high on coke or crack, ripping off drug dealers and essentially anybody, or cars, ripping off anything from anybody that Ordell needs. And Lewis is someone, just like Melanie is someone that he can use to, and Jackie is someone that he can use to, push his life forward. So Jackie's playing a super dangerous game here, but she's also with Ordell, but she's also playing a really dangerous game with Ray Nicolette. And in that, she's told him she's going to bring over another $50,000. And this to me is one of the craziest risks in the book. And I can't help but wonder what her plan B was if it didn't work, in that she tells Ray she's bringing over another $50,000, but she's actually bringing $550,000. The 500 is in the same bag. It's all in the same bag. And Ray just doesn't look because he's expecting to only see 50, and that's all he sees. And it is bold. It is brilliant.
She has a line about, if he finds the rest of the money, then the plan's up, and I'll just say I didn't pack this. Mr. Walker did. It's still a major risk,
but it's a huge risk, because it's not so much that Jackie would be in legal trouble, but because that is all of Ordell's money, basically. That's his life that she's carrying around in the bag. Now, there is going to be a handoff of sorts. Ray stops her. Ray sees the 50. Ray marks the 50 and lets her go on her way to hand it over.
They do refer to it, the handoff, as the switch.
They do. They do refer to
numerous
it
times
as the switch. We also, the name of the book is this scam. Ordell likes to name his scams, and this one he refers to as Rum Punch. I don't actually think we hear him say it, but we hear Melanie or Jackie refer to him having named, what he's doing as Rum Punch.
Or I thought it was Ray was saying that some South American Colombian sting they did was called Rum Punch.
No, I think it was Ordell. Let's
Oh yeah, wait. Yeah, it's actually both.
Okay.
It says, Jackie says about Ordell, he likes his code names. Rum Punch is his deal with the Colombians.
Okay.
And Nicolette says, we used that once. Rum Punch, one word, rounding up Jamaican posses.
I'd be curious why Rum Punch is such a popular code name. Have you ever used a code name for any of your scams, Alex?
No, I haven't. But I don't know if it was just on the jacket or in reviews or something, but people were like, oh yeah, well that's like, Jackie would be serving drinks such as a rum punch on her flights.
Okay.
So I think they're trying to connect it, but I don't remember reading that in the book.
Okay. So she's got Ordell's life savings, Ordell's nest egg, in her hands. She gets by Ray, but she knows that she's being followed. She just doesn't know by who. And she goes to a mall to make the switch it was supposed to be Simone, but it turns out to be Melanie, who is the worst person that I'm sure Jackie or Ordell, nobody wants Melanie to be there. But Jackie is supposed to deliver the money to Melanie, who is supposed to bring it to Ordell. And Ray and friends will catch Ordell with the money that they've marked, and that will be the end of Ordell. Now, a complicating factor in all this is that Ray doesn't really need to build a case anymore because of what happened with some of Ordell's Jack boys. He's arrested them. And so Ray already knows that not only is Ordell involved in gun running, but he's involved in a murder. And so they could just go arrest him, but the problem is they can't find him, and because he's hiding out God knows where. They are hoping to find him, but they don't really need to prove much. It's really just that they need to find him, and that they can arrest him. So
when he says he's not that interested in the money to begin with, which I think spurs Jackie on.
Right. Yeah.
That she's like, well, if you're not interested in the money, I think I would be.
Yeah. No, that is a great point. Seemingly, Ray is trying to make...
it also brings a little realism into it. Like, why would this sting operation be so poorly run? And it's like, well, it's multiple organizations law enforcement organizations working together, and they don't really care about this aspect of it. This is just like...
Right. They're just... Yeah. They at this point... maybe earlier on it was a much bigger deal, but at this point in what they've been doing, they've kept doing their day jobs, and they know Ordell has essentially murdered Gerald or is involved in that murder, and they have witnesses, and it's just a question of catching him. But so they're in a department store. Jackie separates the 50 from the 500. The 50 goes to Melanie. The 500, Max takes. And this is another example where Lewis sees Max there, knows Max, they've had their run-ins. Lewis does not sound the alarm. Eventually he mentions it to Ordell, but he doesn't sound the alarm. And this is just further proof that
the scene with Ordell in the car where he tells him is so incredible.
Well, it's and sad. I mean, because
it's
he
doesn't realize that it's over for him. I mean,
it's been over for him, and it's really sad for Lewis, but it also underscores how vicious Ordell has become, because he's effectively been waiting for this moment. Ordell is not surprised that Lewis has, sadly become so ineffective and so useless. It seems like he was always planning to get rid of Lewis at some point. And when he does it, it's, I think, because Lewis presents no threat. It is similar to, if you have to put a dog to sleep or something like that. I mean, Ordell looks down on Lewis so much that, he's a little sad about it, but it's just like he sees him as totally disposable. And
in the Switch, they're described as like best buddies. They're described as like they have different skin color, but you could confuse the two of them. They're temperamentally so similar. And then I think there is sadness from Ordell in that his good buddy is done.
He's done, but just that he's so able and so willing to get rid of him and to just move on with his life is it's equally sad that's who Ordell has become. Lewis does not freak out when he sees Max and just keeps going. He and Melanie take the bag with only $50,000 in it. Melanie tries to grab it. Lewis can't find the car, and Melanie
the
just...
funniest dialogue again, just making fun of him.
It's brutal, and she can't stop herself, and neither can Lewis.
Even her lines in the mall where she said, "You want to get some jams and a snappy hat?"
Yeah.
And Lewis is so stressed and he's drunk, and she's just reeling off these hilarious lines to him, making fun of him.
Yeah, she's not going to be denied, and she's going after him, and they're in a shopping mall and they can't get out, and I think we've all lost our car at a certain point, but I don't think many of us have not been able to find our car while trying to make a getaway. It's just the ultimate failure. Lewis kills Melanie and then finds his car, and then goes and meets Ordell, and soon he's gone too.
Lewis says, "I expect she's dead." That's one of those Elmore lines where I'm like, this could not be more perfect. It's such an odd phrase, but you could picture a guy like Lewis, like trying to sound serious or something, using that clunky word. I'm like, I don't know how he does it sometimes. Like, that is so funny to me.
It is perfect. It is clear. It is simple, and it says so much, because in that moment, Ordell is talking about how, of all the people you don't want to survive, being shot and talking to the cops, it's Melanie. Even that Lewis isn't sure about, like he shoots her twice, but he's not sure if she's dead, because he's, like you said, he's drunk, he's a little stoned, he's stressed out, he's lost, and he just goes. So Max now has the 500. Jackie is with the cops, and she's saying that Melanie came in and took the money when she was changing, and she didn't know what to do. And there is a little bit of mistrust, from Ray Nicolette as they're talking to her. But throughout the book, Jackie has, I wouldn't say that she's flirted with him, but she's been friendly with him, and particularly with Farron, who is shot and is in the hospital for a few days, and they actually meet at the hospital at least once, maybe twice. And
where they offer her a beer, and she says, "Yeah, that'd be great." She's kind of broing down with the cops.
Right, they're hanging out, and it's not just a detective informant relationship. I mean, there's obviously, Jackie's a beautiful woman, and Ray is a younger guy, and he's got a little bit of a crush on her. So there is that, but there is still a level of friendship that has developed between them, and she has shown some interest and care for Farron, who is he's going to live, but he's been shot, and so he's in the hospital.
We should mention too that Ray Nicolette shows up again in Out of Sight, a book from a few years later.
He sure does.
And he also shows up in the film. So in Jackie Brown, he's played by Michael Keaton, and in Out of Sight, he is also played by Michael Keaton.
He's not nearly as big of a character. It's really just more of a cameo in Out of Sight, but it's great to see him again, and he's dressed almost exactly the same. And
his jacket. One thing that is funny about it is that it's spelled differently. When you see Ray Nicolette written for the movie version, it's E-T-T-E at the end. In the book, it's not.
I did not notice that. We will take it up with Steven Soderbergh when we have him on. But no, and we meet him briefly. He's Karen's boyfriend at the time, and Karen's dad, Marshall, played by the amazing Dennis Farina, kind of like gives him a little bit of a hard time for wearing I don't know if it's an ATF or an FBI jacket in Out of Sight, and Ray is not quite in on the joke, but
I love those connections too, because you got Marshall Sisko, of course, shows up in Cat Chaser. It really when you start to see the macro, there's just dozens and dozens of interconnections, and they're pretty fun to see them.
Well, we'll be talking about those a lot, and I believe you have gone and actually you have your own. I don't know the term. It's essentially like the chart that all serial killers have, but you have one for characters.
I mean, right now it's a pretty boring looking spreadsheet, but I think it would be fun to have a visualized web where you can see the lines connecting, just as an immediate visual of like, oh, I've read Rum Punch, then I can go read The Switch. I can read Out of Sight, just to have some connection to them.
One of the reasons why the books are so much fun and so appealing is that Elmore has a great gift of writing about things that are preposterous, but also totally grounded and totally believable. He fleshes out the world where, because you're seeing so much of these characters, you understand enough of their life in terms of why they might be making these ridiculous decisions. But when you get to know them as people, these decisions are not so ridiculous at all, and in fact make total sense. So Jackie's back in Ray's office, and she's telling her side of the story, which is that Melanie came in and took the money. Again, took $50,000, not $550, because Max has the $500. She's claiming to Ray that Melanie burst into the dressing room while Jackie was changing. Jackie, by the way, decides to go clothes shopping in the midst of this scam, which if I was Ray, I would be really annoyed by. But she's not just hanging out in a dressing room, she's changing her outfit, apparently. And that's what she tells Ray as far as why it took her a minute, because she had to get her clothes back on.
That's her cover,
after Melanie stole this money from her. And that's where Ray shares with Jackie that Melanie's dead. While this is terrible news for Melanie, and I assume Melanie's family, it's also great news, sadly, but it's great news for Jackie, because Melanie cannot dispute what Jackie has just told her, and it does bring up this interesting question of I don't think she's quite as much of an operator, as much of a puppet master as Ordell is, but she is really also using people throughout, and she has no choice, but she's doing it, and she seems to be really good at it. And luckily for her, Melanie can't dispute what she's telling Ray and the rest of the cops. Eventually, Ray lets her go, and she reunites with Max, and they have to figure out what to do. Max actually goes, he knows where Ordell is staying, and they have to tie this off, because Ordell is still around. He is not in jail. He is not dead. He is pretty sure that Jackie ripped him off. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she lost her nerve. Maybe the cops got to her. But Jackie is no longer somebody that Ordell can trust at all. And probably Ordell was going to get rid of her, but he has no reason to pretend otherwise. He knows that she's a loose end that has to be that has to be cleaned up. But Max knows where he is. Max finds him under the pretext of returning his bond money.
I think because Jackie is, her case has been null prost.
So that was part of it where, and this is something interesting that because, Max had been in law enforcement and he knows the system extremely well, he suggests that Jackie asks for this letter, which will basically guarantee that she's not prosecuted for whatever it is that she was arrested for. So because of that, Jackie is no longer a potential flight risk and no longer needs to have bail or a bond to ensure that she shows up in court whenever she's supposed to. So Ordell is owed his money back, and Max, being an upstanding guy, finds him with the help of Winston, returns the money, and basically makes the case that Jackie is really scared, that Melanie went nuts, which lines up with what Ordell learned from Lewis, who shot Melanie before getting shot himself. And that was...
It's part of the reason why he shoots Lewis, because he's like, you didn't count it, you didn't...
Right, you didn't look, you
he's
didn't
like,
count,
you really
didn't
messed
know.
up. You killed Melanie for no reason.
Well, for a lot of reasons, but...
Sure,
yeah,
but minor ones, in the grand scheme.
Yeah, it is rough. So Ordell has shacked up with one of his fourth. She's not a kept woman, but she is a woman that he shacks up with when he feels the need.
She's a user named Raynell.
She's a heroin user, unlike she's an old school junkie.
This is a minor dumb one, but Elmore at this point had just moved a couple blocks from where he lived, and the next street over was called Raynell.
Oh, all right. Well, there we go.
I mean, it has no bearing on the plot or anything, but I have to imagine, driving by or walking by a street sign, he thought, I could imagine somebody.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we meet Raynell in any of the other books again. So
not to my knowledge, but we should. I'll keep my eyes peeled. He hides a lot of them. Like some of the character appearances are like incredibly minor.
For sure. So Max tracks him down, returns the money, and tries to explain, hey, look, Jackie got scared. I have the money. It's in the safe at my office. That's where she's been sleeping. She's terrified. She can't go to the cops. She thinks you're going to kill her. And Max persuades him. And Ordell doesn't trust him at all, but he takes the bait. He calls Max's office. Jackie picks up, and Ordell knows that, okay, it's time to go get his money. However, he's not the only person there. So Ordell shows up, and this is another really big risk that Jackie takes, but at this point, she has no choice. As soon as Ordell walks in, he sees Ray Nicolette and knows that he's cooked, and it's just a question of, can he escape or can he bring Jackie down with him? Even though Jackie is in no immediate threat, she's certainly in danger of Ordell eventually killing her.
Well, we know Ordell plans on killing her, but
yeah,
they aren't as sure as we are.
And Jackie is one of the few times in the book where there's an exclamation point. There's italics and an exclamation point, which is really rare for Elmore.
Well, he said two every 100,000 words.
I think there's actually a couple in the book. You notice them because they're so rare.
Well, even by his own admission in the rules, it's break them if you can. But these are good ones to live by.
No one's complaining, but they're fun to find. They're little Easter eggs. So if they're there, they're put there for a reason. And she yells out to Ray that Ordell's got a gun, and Ray doesn't waste any time. All his aggressiveness, his wanting to make a name for himself, his having fun being a cop, comes through, and he blows Ordell away. That is the end of Ordell. It's not the end of our story. Eventually, because number one, there's no searching. There's still the question of, well, what happens to the 500? Ray, he's not aware of the 500. They don't look for it, but it was sitting right under their nose in Max's office in the safe. Ray has solved his case. He's caught the killer of Gerald. He has tracked down all of these guns, or he knows where all these guns have been going, even though he hasn't recovered them. And Ray moves on. But then there's the question of, what do Jackie and Max do? And how do they turn out?
And we have that short kind of epilogue chapter.
Which is great, because it says so much about both of them. Number one, Max, even though he had all 500, he took his cut. He took the same commission that he always has taken as a bail bondsman, 10%. and he mails her the rest. And Jackie shows up in Ordell's car in his convertible Mercedes that he doesn't need anymore. And I believe they drive off into the sunset together.
It's left a little open-ended, but I think just the nature of there being kind of an epilogue, which is not something that Elmore does very often, is him saying that I think they're going to work out together.
I don't think Jackie comes back.
No, I don't. Or Max.
If Max had taken half of the money or none of the money, I don't think Jackie comes back. But I think there's something about how he did what he thought was right in that moment. And despite the craziness of the situation, he did his best to stay true to his code. And I think that's ultimately what won Jackie over. And I like how it ended. How about you?
Oh, I thought it was great. I love the final line where Max says, "Where would we go?" And Jackie says, "Does it matter?" And that's it.
That is it. We'll talk more about Jackie Brown, and as we explore some of the film adaptations and TV adaptations. But I think what works really well about Jackie Brown and all the adaptations that live up to the books are they know what to pull back and where to dig in. Mm-hmm. And ultimately for me it's about character. It's not plot. It's the character and what makes these people tick and what makes them make these decisions that on the surface seem irrational. But because we get to know them so well and we get to know what it is, what's going on in their life and what got them to this place, for the most part, everyone is making good decisions based on who they are. They're making decisions. They might not be decisions that I would make or that you would make, but they're making decisions Melanie's making decisions that make sense for her. And I think that goes for all these characters and why it's so much fun to hang out with them. So
that's true.
Well, look, we're going to have a lot to talk about on the Elmore Leonard Podcast. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Alex, thanks for making the time. I had a blast. I hope you had
thanks,
a good
Judd.
time.
Yeah, I mean, I love these books. I love talking about them, so it's a pleasure.
Well, let's keep doing it.
All right.
We will be back with you before too long. I believe our next podcast will be about the Switch, but you know what? We don't know yet. So you'll just have to actually look in your podcast player to see what's next. But join us again. And to quote the man himself, take it easy.
Take it easy.
The Elmore Leonard Podcast is produced and edited by Judd Rubin. Music by Greg Ahee. Hosted by Judd Rubin and Alex Leonard. Executive produced by Peter Leonard. Copyright 2025, Elmore Leonard Inc. Please visit us at elmoreleonardofficial.com or send us an email at hello@theelmoreleonardpodcast.com.